Today I want to repeat the sentiments that I've expressed in some of the earlier long-term plan meetings, that I'm not happy with this rates rise. But in saying that, I acknowledge that we're really between a rock and a hard place, and I think that phrase has been thrown around a couple of times in the last few months. I talk to residents every week in my weekly drop-in centre at the Papanui Library, and the stories are always the same. The rates burden for our residents is real. I think a lot of us are hearing that, and we're expecting them to make some really tough decisions with their own household budgets, and it's incumbent on us as a council to do the same. Recognising that we don't have a great deal of room, of course the question is, have we done enough? And that's what we've all been thinking about in recent weeks. I think on balance we've made a few tweaks. We've deferred some capital investment to later years. We've very minor tweaks to some levels of service, and I think largely we have just tinkered around the edges, and I don't think that we've really shifted the dial in any meaningful way. I don't know about you guys, but there's a difference between no, not ever and no, not now. This is a conversation that we have often with our teenager at home. I think increasingly we all live in a world of immediacy, with a culture of we want everything and we want it now. And the fact is that we have to get better at saying no, not now. And that is not the same as no, not ever. And on balance, I think that we should have had a few more no, not now items in this plan. The other aspect for me that I think needs a mention here is the how we do things. Sure, what we do is important, and in many respects we don't have a great deal of room to move on what we do because it's statute driven. But the how we do is the thing that really needs closer inspection, and I was delighted to see Councillor Kewen's notice of motion pass yesterday at Finance and Performance, which will see us starting to have a closer look at the how we do things. My own amendment in relation to Wheels to Wings on Harewood Road, if you thought I was going to get away without mentioning it, you were wrong. You know, this is now going to cost the ratepayer potentially a whopping great $34 million, and that is a case in point. I'm not debating the merits of it here, but a discussion for us about priorities, about alternate routes away from main traffic corridors, and about cheaper designs is warranted. And I'm really pleased that this will be coming back before us in September, October last year. This plan is far from perfect, and I recognise that politics, like life, is all about compromise, and you simply can't please everybody all of the time. I think from the very get-go, we were on a hiding to nothing with this in terms of the aspects of this plan that we just had no control over. Do I like this rate? No. Can I live with it? I have no choice. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Coker, and then...
Thanks. I don't really have too much to say. I just we worked really well together on Tuesday, and thank you to staff for guiding. We did, and thank you to staff for guiding us through that. I also want to thank all the councillors for all the amendments that we put through, because people have criticised us for all the amendments, but actually a lot of things were changed in the draft to what it was the previous year. A lot of things were dropped, and we heard from submitters, and we knew beforehand as well that those things needed to stay. A lot of the environmental aspects of our council budget are very important to people. So I think it's good the changes that we've made, having the pop-up South Library. I'm very pleased that we've got that through, and I am a little bit frustrated that we've had to push so much on to next year, because I think there'll be a lot of like we keeping most of the amendments with the plan to look at them in the next annual plan, and that will be good to do that and to consult people on those, but it does mean waiting a year for those things, and sometimes it's actually good to do things now rather than leaving them, because if you leave them, how long will you leave them for? So that's a question for us to ponder about. And about the rates rise, it is really good that we've come to the number that we have under 10%. What's interesting is reading something this morning. It was a comment either online, it might have been in the press comments even, that someone said, well, the under 10% is actually amazing because they've just had their new house and contents insurance at 33%. And, you know, they were like that last year, so I hate to get the next round. So I think if we keep it in that context, we've done an incredible job considering the stress that council's under and the costs that we incur that we can't control. But yeah, I'm looking forward really actually to next year and trying to get more things through on the biodiversity front, thinking about parks. Cycleways are really important to people, at least in my ward. They really want the connections in, especially Simeon Street. I've had people talking to me about that, prompted from me. So, you know, and I'm like, oh wow, that's great that they want these things that we're trying to aim for. So I look forward to next year, and well done everybody. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Councillor Templeton.
Kia ora. I'd like to start this debate by acknowledging our communities. It's really tough out there at the moment, but there has been a level of understanding of our situation, of the value of council services, and there's been a great engagement in the process, and I'd like to thank them for that. I'd also like to thank colleagues for their constructive discussions and debate on Tuesday, and pleased to get support to improve our water supply. Putting $500,000 of additional capital on for design work in year one is essential if we are to increase the main and sub-main renewals from year 2 of the LTP and start improving our network instead of kicking the can down the road yet again. And while this plan will not meet community expectations around cutting carbon emissions, it does start to address the pressing need to plan for adaptation with our communities and to address the intergenerational equity in funding that adaptive response. There seems to be some confusion from members about the purpose of the fund. Creating debt headroom to respond to disasters is one thing, and it's a good idea. But to plan to move infrastructure and protect our communities ahead of disaster striking is another thing. And expecting future generations, our children, to pay for the solutions to the problem we have caused is fundamentally unfair. The fund will not be enough to cover all of the costs, but it is a start, and I look forward to working with staff, colleagues and the community on how it is best used. There was a level of frustration on Tuesday at the process and how it unfolded, but that was due to the cumulative impact of things during the process over the last few months. Over half the amendments were there due to a lack of governance visibility of the various programs of work within council, both regularly during the term and within the LTP planning process. Seeing the really useful water supply information too late in the process to be able to increase the budget was really frustrating. But it's likewise with parks, libraries, sport and rec and other core parts of council where we have not seen the work programs or budget lines to check for savings, efficiencies or prioritisation. This needs to change. We need regular full reporting during the term and detailed discussions to inform the draft long-term plan like we used to. This has not been a line-by-line interrogation of the council budget, and only finding out from community submissions that budgets and staffing levels have changed isn't allowing us to do our governance oversight and decision-making role sufficiently. And we still have the major decisions on our transport program to go later this year. The lack of alignment between central government policy timing and local council decision-making has never been clearer, and the lack of alignment on what our city will need to cater for our fast-growing population is also important. I'd like to end by thanking staff, especially those in the engagement space, what matters most, the OrbVis bubble tool and so much more, in really helping our communities engage with the process and respond in a well-informed way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cotter, please.
Really, thank you. Yeah, look, what a marathon. And 7,000 submissions, and that shows such an increased level of interest and engagement from our residents, and that's fantastic. That's what we want to see. So our role is to find the balance, of course, among all the wants, alongside all the responsibilities and programs that we must deliver for our city. Above all, we must continue investing in the planning and infrastructure because we are growing fast. People are coming here, and it's because we have everything to offer. But most of all, I believe it's our outstanding and easily accessed natural environment and the great outdoors that's attracting so many. But that beautiful natural environment doesn't come for free. So it's heartening that this LTP has provided an increase to the Biodiversity Fund. We have an Innovation and Sustainability Fund, and we've created a new Environmental Partnership Fund of $700,000 over the first 2 years, and then that will be $1 million a year from year 3 onwards. It's a partnership fund We rely on partnerships with organisations such as ECAN, DOC, Ngāi Tahu, the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust, Fish and Game, Kiwi2 Trust, the list goes on. There's at least another 30 organisations. But most importantly, it's the thousands of volunteers and the tens of thousands of volunteer hours that is truly enhancing, protecting and restoring our natural environment. Look, Christchurch and Banks Peninsula have 15 bird species on DOC's threatened bird list. We have problematic pests posing high risk to Indigenous habitat areas. We have rare dryland ecosystems under threat. Land use changes are threatening some of our nationally important areas and require legal protection. And our urban waterways quality is adversely affecting our biodiversity. So our biodiversity and environment protection needs to be an integral part of our council's planning and operational activities. So our investment is crucial. We can't get these things back if we allow them to be lost. These are now funds. These are now projects. They can't wait. And I'd like to thank all the submitters who've given us the mandate to resource these. So we're living in uncertain times, so maintaining the 600 million headroom for unseen circumstances or events is prudent, as is the establishment of the Climate Resilience Fund. I want to especially recognise and thank CCHL for stepping up and providing our dividend to help keep our increase down, reinforcing to Council and the people of Christchurch the wisdom and benefit of owning these assets. And of course, thank you to staff for the enormous number of hours and work and the changes and the endless answers to endless questions from us over the 18 months. Thank you for the team, the consultation team, for the document and all the work you put into that and the bubble tool. And thank you to colleagues for reaching some consensus where appropriate, because that helped an enormous amount. And thank you for supporting the Community Centre in Shirley. And thank you especially to our submitters and our residents of this beautiful city that we are charged with running and making appropriate, responsible decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison-Hunt.
Tēnā rā tatu katoa. This is my first long-term plan as a decision maker, and it's incredible to think that a small business owner / basketball coach / young father could literally walk off the street, throw his name into the ring with 7 other people, and then start voting on $16.8 billion worth of public assets. Isn't that weird? You know, our council is a pretty diverse group. We've got accountants, lawyers, salespeople, seasoned politicians, Uber drivers, teachers, community advocates, and even a guy that dug a hole by a river. And growing up, I actually never knew what lay ahead. Like my father always has done, I've always sought challenges, mastering one before moving on to the next. And from his teachings, I've learned that in this role, surprises come every single day. One day it's a resident needing help with chip seal, a burst pipe, an old playground issue, or a tree dropping leaves on their house. The next day I'm at events with CEOs, entrepreneurs, investors and innovators. And then the third day I'm at a grassroots community hub while they're running a facility on the smell of an oily rag, just to feed the community. Christchurch itself is an amazing place, thriving with passionate people. We've got a rejuvenated CBD, shout out Bruce, connected creative communities, and constant movement and change. Now, I've said it before, but we directly and immediately affect every single foot that steps foot in this city. This is more than a budget, it's actually holding people's hopes and dreams within it. Whether we're funding a local pool or street, getting rates down so retirees don't have to worry about their next lotto ticket, or anything of the sort, Councillor Henstock quite rightly talked on the precedent of no, not now. And however, this very rates rise is set from the no, not now predecessors. I've heard the term unprecedented more than I've had heartbeats. And I must say that there are frustrations from young people and young families talking about kicking the can down the road. I understand the financial constraints of ratepayers, myself included, so I think we have come to an appropriate balance, but I do not think we as decision makers have balanced enough within the 9.6 we settled on today. If we could do more engagement internally, why haven't we done it yet? If we can think we do things cheaper and safer, why haven't we done it yet? So here are my honest thoughts on the process from a new elected member. The term material in the context of the LTP was absolutely baffling. I thought the process was straightforward. You get presented within the budget, put preliminary resolutions in, talk to the community about it, listen to them, and then add their voice to the plan through amendments. but instead we request countless reports for future annual plans, where most of those amendments will most likely be deemed out of order to wait for the next long-term plan. So I recommend for those who are going to be taking this seat in the future, including your recommendations in the draft, to avoid the issue of materiality. With due respect to my predecessors, it's time we keep pushing forward in the city and in Riccarton, and I've heard countless submissions on various issues. Even without the LTP, we've made significant changes. I want to thank staff for the thousands of hours of work that they've put in. I want to thank Transport, Three Waters, Parks, and the community team especially. And lastly, as decision makers, again, I don't think we've quite gone far enough in terms of our intergenerational response. It needs to be more aligned with the long-term well-being of our communities. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peters.
Thank you. I'd like to start off by acknowledging the staff and their fantastic efforts throughout this entire process. It's been a heck of a journey. I understand a really large workload on each and every one of the staff involved, and thank you so much for those hours that you've invested into this process. It's truly appreciated. Also like to thank my colleagues for our understanding in listening to each other and debating amongst ourselves and debating in public and very respectfully, I think, working through this process and landing where we have today. I think the 9.9% that we're landing on today is not ideal, but I think in the environment we're in, we've done incredibly well. Now, we all hear about the blowouts in insurance prices everywhere you turn at the moment, and our council is not exempt from that process, and it's a large quantum of why things sit where they do today. So whilst it's not going to be easy for each and every ratepayer in the city to wear the 9.9% increase, it's a heck of a lot better than where we started this process when we were talking about 17-18%. And it's a lot better than a lot of councils around New Zealand. So we've done, I think, a stunning job to get where we have. Thanks to CCHL for coming to the party and finding a way to help out with extra dividend to lower this quantum. That is appreciated, and I look forward to our council working with CCHL going forward and getting the best out of the assets we have as a city, because the assets we have are incredibly valuable. We're very lucky to have them, and it's been an interesting process to look at the program levels that exist in our council. When I first started in the draft process, I brought a few amendments along, and to be informed that the amendments that I brought could be looked after in the program level of budgets was eye-opening. And I certainly would like to see more of that program level visibility to us councillors going forward, because there seems to be a lot of work in there that, as councillors, I think we'd be quite pleased and stunned to see us sitting there on that program level. And it would be good to be able to have a glimpse inside the bonnet there and help prioritise that for our communities. It's been great in this LTP process to see the final delivery and outworking of LTP value to my community. You'll all be remembering the Maratiki Hornby Centre opened just a couple of months ago, and that really was born in an LTP process some 20 years ago or thereabouts. So, be heartened, councillors. We might start on a journey in an LTP, but it does outwork eventually and get delivered for your communities. So thank you to everyone who's been involved in this process, and I look forward to hopefully having the opportunity to take part in a few more of these to go forward. And next year's annual plan with all these reports and amendments should be interesting. So bring it on, and let's get this finished today.
Okay, Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Mayor Phil. Look, I've really enjoyed this first LTP. It was such a rigorous process. 9.9% rates increase is not where I would have liked us to be, but it was hard won. It could have been an awful lot higher, and we need to put that in context. I speak to residents who are affected by that all the time, and that bothers them. But that aside, I think staff and councillors have worked incredibly hard to get to this point, and I want to thank Mayor Phil for his leadership and for the support of Deputy Mayor Pauline Cotter. I think they did a great job with the Mayor's Recs, sort of hashing them out. I want to focus on some of the positive things, the funding of the street art community, so thank you for that, because I think that's going to make a big difference in our city. Arana Park getting funding, I think that's fantastic. These are icons of our city. Our wonderful arts centre is also getting funding, and the Shirley Community Centre, which will be really positive for that community. You know, we come to work to solve problems, and I feel like we've solved quite a few with this LTP. We live in one of the most beautiful cities in the world, one of the most beautiful countries in the world, and we're very blessed to have what we have and to live where we do. We've got beautiful rivers, beaches, mountains nearby, parks. Hagley Park is the second biggest public park in an urban centre in the world, which is extraordinary. We've got a council staff who are committed and work really hard to make the city better every day. You only have to go to the citizenship ceremonies where we get 300 new citizens every month, people who come here and want to live here in this city, and they're so grateful to become citizens, so grateful to be part of our city. So before we complain and worry about the things we don't have and can't do, etc., let's be grateful for what we have. There will always be problems, and there will always be us to try and solve them. So it's been a great process. I'm really glad to be part of it, and I feel like we've done a good job. Could it be better? Yes, always. But we tried and worked hard, so well done, everyone.
Any? Yep. Kendrick?
Thank you. I still don't think we understand the changes that our staff have been through for some time. Changes of CEO, the upheaval of ELT, and the general uncertainty for all staff. And for them to have come up and supported us to make the decision today, I think is truly outstanding. So to all of you, thank you very much. And to Audit New Zealand as well. It's been a confusing 18 months at times, but it is a good journey to be on for us to raise our understanding right across the board. Life isn't perfect, and we never get exactly what we want, and that goes right through everything in life. So I think with our communities, some understand that more than others. Some do expect, I want it now, and that is a conversation which I'm more than happy and do take up with my community, because all things take time. But the number one thing I think we need to understand going forward into the long-term plan, as a number of cans have been kicked down the road, is progressive improvement. If you look at successful companies or organisations, they truly understand, they attach it to R&D, but progressive improvement is the key to any large organisation, and that also includes a city. Our key important things, which are the three waters, roads. Roads now need to include cycle lanes. So when we mention roading and roads, it should automatically be thought about cycle lanes. The argument about should they be, and I don't like the term gold plating, because gold plating is a waste of time. We should be actually investing gold rather than putting it on our roads. But that is a key component of now discussing what level and what standard that we are acceptable, or what is acceptable to us. Maybe it's better to do more with less, and I am in that school. But parks, I think that our sports field plan is absolutely fantastic, and it will solve a whole lot of issues in the next 10 years, but there will be a whole lot of new ones, and it's just what it is. But progressive improvement for a city is absolutely essential. And when I'm meeting people from outside of Christchurch, and they are so excited about Christchurch, it is wonderful to see what is on offer here, and that is due to our staff giving us the right information as we go forward to make the right the decisions. To stay under 10% cannot be lost on how important that is. If you look around New Zealand and then you go further afield into Britain, I was looking at Birmingham and other cities facing bankruptcy. We are here under 10% delivering the core projects and the core things that our communities need, with a few things on the side. And I think that cannot be forgotten. So I'm really pleased with how we're going forward. It's not perfect and never will be. So congratulations to you all, and it's been a pleasure working with you. Frustrating at times, but you know, that's the way I am. Cheers.
And that is a quote from Tim's wife. No, she says he's frustrating. Right, is anyone else? Councillor Kieran?
Not sure where to start here, but because we went into this LTP hearing a term cost of living crisis time and time again. No one's mentioned it here at the table as we sign off a 10% rate rise. But I will just read out the Oxford Dictionary meaning of the word crisis. It's a noun, a time of intense difficulty or danger. And then it has in brackets the current economic crisis. Interesting term that crisis gets used all the time because it's a very cheap throwaway word. I'll actually stand for the rest of mine. I'll start by thanking the Mayor. I think that the way that you've led us through this has stopped what could have been many awkward situations of councillors getting at each other over the things we want and the things we stand for. I stand now because you always stood in the chamber when you spoke, and I'm going to stand up for those people in our community that are actually going to be hurt by this rate rise. Don't pat yourselves on the back thinking keeping it under 10% is great. The rate of inflation is 4.7, so we're double the rate of inflation. That other organisation down the road, ECAN, should hang their heads in shame because they quadruple the rate of inflation to put on what I see as a lot of nice to haves, when some people in our community will lose their houses when you keep putting up rates at double the rate of inflation. Insurance is up, that's another rort, because they made their biggest profits ever last year. So for them to say, oh, we've got all these disasters, we've got to take more money off you, they're telling lies so they can rob you. They are making massive profits, which goes along with the banks. The interest rates are far too high, they're hurting people. New Zealand is now broke, Christchurch is broke, and we're going to make them more broke because our rate rise at double the rate of inflation now drives inflation. You're taking more money off people. Small businesses, which is the majority of businesses in the city, are owned by people that have mortgages that are far too high. Now we're going to make their rates even higher, so they have to put their prices up or squeeze their staff or cut the quality of what they deliver. And which gets me on to, we just didn't cut enough at a time when we cannot afford it. We had to do more things. My councillor next to me, I'm actually quite proud of, Councillor Moore, has listed a number of things throughout the process, asked us to get under the hood of a lot of our services, and we just didn't. And we should have. There was the one time in our city's history when we're not flush with cash that we should have cut a few more things, or almost everything should have just had a trim, and we could have kept our rate rise down at a rate that would be acceptable. I've actually lost sleep over this. I know there's people in my ward that hurt. People come up and tell you, and when they tell you, for me it's not water off a duck's back. I take it into my heart, and I get frickin' anxiety at 3 o'clock in the morning when I think about how much a 10% rates rise can hurt people. And that's what we're about to do to them, and I'm not proud of that because we could have actually done a lot better. Yes, we've got some wins, and we do deliver great services, and I thank every single one of our staff that deliver great services to the people of Christchurch, but this table should have just done a bit better this year.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Johansson.
Thank you. I too want to start off by just acknowledging the hard work that's gone in from both staff and elected members and the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor on this LTP. I think for me, it's a really challenging LTP, and it became pretty apparent probably about a month ago that we should actually try and wait till September when we get greater certainty from what central government are doing before we finalise it. And effectively, if you look at what we did on Tuesday, it's essentially kind of what we've done with just passing something today, but then having a big reconsideration of a number of projects in September, which I welcome, which I think is a prudent approach. So we're living in a very uncertain time, but we have spent a long time looking at what we can do. I do want to concur with some of the comments that have been made around process. I definitely think we need to get better at engagement. We need very clear program lists of what is proposed so that communities and elected members can see what work is on budget when, so that we can make clear additions and substitutions. There's a lot of good things in this budget, and many of them may not have had visibility through our debate or through our amendment process, but this budget finally contains money to move the offensive and objectionable organics plant from Bromley. It also contains budget to do very important work to reduce the odours that are coming from the wastewater treatment plant, and it includes budget to address the deterioration of our urban waterways, making specific reference to improving the Opawaho Heathcote, one of the country's worst urban polluted rivers. But at the same time that we've got some good things in here, and I also acknowledge the sports field funding, it's not lost on me that, you know, we've focused on putting in small charges to the Botanic Gardens and Hagley Park playgrounds, but we refuse to put a ticket levy on the current stadium. And in the lead up to the LTP, let's not forget, we spent months considering how we could maximise the value of our assets by removing them from our strategic asset list and possibly selling them off because of increased costs. But yet we've hardly spent any time looking at how we finance the single biggest and costliest project in our LTP, Te Kaha, that is responsible for a significant rates increase. So there's other things in the level of service that I am concerned about. I do not agree with the idea that we should remove the level of service around owning the council-owned units for social housing and reducing the target that we have of 1,798 for use. I can only see that there's a risk that they do get sold off if we don't have some protection in our level of service. But overall, I commend the work that's been done on this LTP. I think there's a lot of ways that we can improve, and I think a number of councillors have raised suggestions. The reality is that we do need a budget as a city, and although there'll be things that I disagree within the LTP, as an overall document, I will support it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Thank you to all staff involved. Thank you to all staff involved, particularly Mary, for what seems like you're working about 100 hours a week. Somewhat concerned for your well-being, but you stepped up when we lost a CEO partway through this. So thank you for your service to the city. Thank you to I would be given that the clap. Just going to need we can add an extra 10 seconds as well. And thank you to Katie and our engagement staff for a record level of submissions, I would add. And I will go on to thank the Arts Centre for boosting engagement in our long-term plan. In 2022, so one of the first decisions we made was not to explore operational savings as part of an annual plan. Fast forward to the long-term plan. And what I can't get my head around is why we didn't at least look at levels of service, to at least go and consult them, at least just have a look. All we did was stick dots on a wall for 20 minutes to give an indication of what we may or may not have an appetite for. We didn't spend the time needed to do a sufficient deep dive to at least find out what we could go and consult on. We should have spent days on that process, not minutes. So it may be that there's few viable options, but when we speak to ratepayers doing it tough, we've at least got to look them in the eye and say, yep, we looked at absolutely everything we could, and then put the options in front of them to see what they have to say about them. Amendments, one of the most important parts of the process. They're basically the only way for councillors to be involved in shaping the plan. Otherwise, we're just sitting back and waiting for a plan to be put in front of us and then rubber stamping it, and that's not what we're elected to do. We're here to have a look, scrutinise, look for savings, or add investment if we think there's not being investment where it needs to go, and do our due diligence. That's what's expected of us. Amendments don't all have to add costs. I've attempted to find some savings. They're never a silver bullet. Then, of course, you get the advice back and they're not as exciting as you thought they might have been. But I've given it a go. I've learnt from that, and we'll give it another crack next year. We should be here at the final stage debating some really meaty decisions that may impact rates one way or another. I think that's good for democracy. But if we want to change the perception about submissions not being worthwhile, we need to have a close look about what options are being laid out in our consultation, because you're very, very limited what you can tweak between the draft and the final. But yeah, many cost savings won't be popular, but we won't be popular tomorrow. Rate rises never are. So because we've ended up having so few options to consider in finding cost savings, we've made some cuts in areas that to me just don't make sense. One of the biggest chunks of the rate rise today is the new stadium. It's huge financial risk, but we've decided to reduce the amount of events that can actually help generate revenue and pay for the thing. So we can stomach an extra 2% on rates for that facility, but not an extra 0.04% to ensure that it's well used. We're deleting tens of millions out of the local economy. Doesn't make sense to me. Our long-term plans need to include long-term thinking about our infrastructure, our residents, affordability, our businesses, our local economy, and a pathway and vision for economic growth and prosperity. And I don't necessarily believe we've found that balance. One of the most important points I think actually was made on Tuesday, that the Mayor mentioned, that we've got a university in the city going really well, but it's being held back by the lack of accommodation. But at the same time, this council is actively opposed to building more housing around that very university. So I'm just concerned that we're holding ourselves back and not attracting the investment we need in the city in a number of ways. Thank you.
Councillor McClellan, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really proud of us as a team for where we've ended up. I think we've struck a really balanced budget. To bring it in under 10% is pretty impressive. I know my father down in Central Otago was facing a 33% rate rise, which is pretty gut-wrenching, really. I think we need to be mindful that we actually set out in our letter of expectation. We don't want service level cuts. We don't want the libraries to close. We don't want swimming pools to close. And I think that's really important, and it actually makes me even more proud when I think what we haven't cut and yet what we've been able to achieve in spite of the pressures we're facing around insurance, inflation, and dare I say it, te kaha. I do agree with Councillor Harrison-Hunt around some of the process issues. I think we need to socialise a deadline amongst ourselves when it comes to amendments. We have to all be really clear and hold each other accountable. You don't need that much time really after hearing what people have to say to come up with your ideas and submit them. I agree also about the consultation document and making sure that that's really robust and gives us lots of latitude. But I would caution colleagues, you have to actually know what you want to do before the consultation document. And my reading of the amendments was that people really didn't have that clarity at that point. So I think I would encourage people to think, what are the one or two things you want to do with your time every term, if you are lucky enough to have more than one, and realise you'll probably only really get one of them to come off. So think of what that is, make sure it's in the CD, but also think of those little small things that you can do by way of amendment. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to the annual plan. I'm looking forward to an improved process, and I'm really glad that we've introduced that vacant land differential. I'm really glad that colleagues supported the Greening the East project and the Shirley Community Centre, and I'm glad that also we're increasing we're charging Airbnb, full-time unhosted Airbnb operators appropriately. So I think all in all, it's been really good. Thank you.
Councillor Donovan? I'll ask someone else first. If you, someone else, okay. Councillor Fields.
It was unexpected. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the winners of this budget are sports teams, sports fans, and that's about it, really. But look, I mean, that's fine, because look, I like both of those things, right? But it's not going to there's not too much in here to get people excited apart from that, which is fine. I mean, let's do the basics, right? Billions on roads, billions on three waters, so far, so processional. That's where your rates rises have gone, people. Stadiums, roads and pipes by a country mile. That's what it is. If you want to deal with the basics, that's what we've done. It's a cost of living crisis underpinned by basics. I commend our Mayor for leading us through the process. He has been a joy to work with throughout, and it's not easy being up there in the hot seat. So thank you, Your Worship, for your good humour and resilience throughout. And I want to thank our long-suffering staff who have been through the ringer. In this process, we've had a couple of side distractions, I think it's fair to say, as we've progressed, but I'm happy to report we came through them unscathed and in a stronger position than ever. There's been a lot of talk about the stadium. I just want to say my son said to me last night, I went out on a father-son date, and he said to me how much he loves to drive past it and seeing as it's being built. It's really inspiring for him. He was 5 when the earthquake hit. He's just about to turn 19, and so it was exciting to see him excited. You know, that makes me happy. The stadium will be a game changer. I've got no doubt about that. Maybe the game it's changing to is rugby league, and I believe the potential is something we need to support in Christchurch. But hey, it costs money to build all that game change, and that's why we're pushing 10% rates rise this year. That's just the reality. It's a cost of living crisis underpinned by game change. Here are some of the things this budget doesn't support. Rural communities, rural landowners, farmers, volunteers and people who swim in the sea. I hear you say, but Tyrone, Banks Peninsula did really well this year, and it has on some level, but it has because it's full of organised people who give their time and energy to their communities and only ask for a small amount in return. 1 in 5 oral submissions in this chamber came from Banks Peninsula, and because they continue to be engaged and see a vision for our city, and it's disappointing there hasn't been universal support for our rural people around this council table, but that's okay, they just get on with it. There is not a lot of vision in this budget, which is fine, it's about basics, but if we don't do a vision for our city beyond pipes, I don't know who will. The government? Because many of the things the government doesn't do for us, what they don't do for us is make our city a wonderful place to live. We, our citizenry, have done that mostly on our own, and what I find, despite a couple of angry comments in the social media universe, the objective measures of Christchurch are really, really positive, and something we should unreservedly be proud of. And the reason we're here in the golden period right now is because the people who've made decisions before us made good decisions, bold decisions, decisions that help set us apart from the tired old metropolitans that have traditionally hogged the limelight. I'm almost finished, Your Worship. So maybe this budget is a wee bit uninspiring, and uninspiring is definitely quite popular right now. This LTP knows the cost of everything, but, and I hope this is not true, it is beginning to lose sight of the value. I hope and wish that we find it within ourselves to start talking about a future that isn't punctuated by what we can't do, because the Christchurch we have today is and should be about what we can do. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Donovan, please.
Sorry, I've been so enthralled. I just want to acknowledge everybody here today, because I know it's been such a gruelling process, and as I look around the room I can see a lot of tired faces, not least of which I'd have to say is mine. So I want to acknowledge the Mayor. I think that he's done an outstanding job in terms of bringing some humour and a bit of light relief to what has been quite a tiring and quite often boring process.
Surely not.
No, but as we sit here today, I also want to reflect on why we're all here, and I think I can speak for all of us that we're all here because we want to make the city a better place. We're here to speak on behalf of all of our very diverse communities, and for me, I'm here to also speak on behalf of those that we don't often hear at council. So for me, this budget is all about the people. And this budget, we've heard from a lot of people, over 7,000 residents, which is a record. And as Councillor Moore has noted, there's been some big issues that have been driving that. And I think that's a real important testament to a city that people really do care. We've also had a lot of people come and speak in person, which again was a very long process, but I found it really helpful to really understand what it is that people really care about. And what I found interesting about that is when people came to speak to us, actually what they spoke to us about is what they care about the city and what makes it a great place. And what they said to us was that they want it to be a greener city. They want it to be a safer city for the kids to get around. They want our natural environment to be safeguarded for future generations. And also that they wanted us to continue to invest in the city. They wanted us to get on and fix things that haven't been fixed, such as Pages Road Bridge, which we've all heard a lot about. And they want us to make sure that we continue making progress on things that we haven't quite finished. Some of those are things like some of the cycleways that we haven't completed. So as we are focused on talking about cuts and deferrals and pushing out decisions to future annual plans, we have to also remember that this comes at a cost. If we keep delaying investing in key projects such as cycleways, then many people in communities such as mine who do lack access to things like cars and equitable access to get to work and school miss out. If we keep deferring investments into our natural environment, then we lose access to what many of us love about the city. So I just want to conclude by saying, once again, thanks to everybody, and most of all, I want to say a big thanks to staff who, as we all know, council can seem like a nameless and faceless place. But once again, it's all about the people. So I just want to say thanks.
Okay, Councillor Goff, please.
Look, Mayor Phil was quoted in the press the other day on the LTP saying that it all boils down to 3 I's, inflation, interest rates and insurance costs. And I think the truth is there's a fourth, and that's ideology. The level of financial pain that residents are experiencing is indeed unprecedented. Unlike the earthquake, when that occurred, residents don't have insurance cover for inflation, a recession, interest rates, or a cost of living crisis. A significant contributor to all of this is council rates rises. If we want to help our residents most, rates rises far ahead of inflation need to stop. It all flows through. That does require discipline and an appetite to do things differently. During my tenure as a councillor, I've never heard a louder and clearer message from our residents about the financial pain that they're experiencing and the strong opposition to the proposed rates rises. The consensus is that these increases are unmanageable and unsustainable. This couldn't be more evident through submissions, public meetings, community feedback, all of which you've received. Yet never as a councillor have I experienced more amendments to an LTP process to add projects than I have through this one right now. There's just a disconnect that I can't reconcile. And by a slim margin, the council directed our staff to quash a full review of levels of service as part of this long-term plan. The LTP is specifically designed for this purpose, to evaluate why we do what we do, how much it costs, and whether it remains relevant in this current climate. Now was the time, in my view, to conduct this review, and it wasn't done. I don't know if our levels of grant funding are still appropriate. To hand out around 40 million per year in grant funding, the highest per capita out of all councils in New Zealand, is just extraordinary. I fear that we've become the funder of last resort, or potentially seen as a soft touch from some organisations that rely on ratepayer funding for their very survival. I think now is the time to strongly say that simply rattling the tin louder is not a sustainable business model, and that ratepayers are not an unlimited source of funding. So I think the Mayor's recommendations are actually incorrectly named, because while the Mayor's charged via legislation to leading an LTP, the recommendations really are a compromise of what we could likely receive majority support around. And we've made progress from where the rates rises could have been, but I just don't think they've gone far enough. I can't thank Mayor Phil enough for the work that he's done in leading this process, but I think you're between a rock and a hard place. I really thank the staff for their tireless efforts on this, especially the support staff and councillors. Well, we don't always agree. I value your hard work and passion and commitment. And certainly Council CE Mary Richardson, your tireless efforts through this have been just outstanding, and I can't thank you enough for that. You did make a comment on Tuesday that I've never heard a Council CE say, and that is that we're spending other people's money. And I think that's the crux of it. I think that that's also been forgotten, and with rates rises at double the rate of inflation, I do not think that that is good enough for us to hold our heads high and say that we're on financially sustainable footing going forward. So for that reason, I can't support the adoption of this LTP.
Councillor McDonald.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Phil, and again, I guess reiterate the points that people have made around acknowledging both yourself and Mary, and actually you, Pauline, as well, just in terms of leading us through this. I think people are beginning to understand that this is a very evenly balanced council, and so the art of compromise is the only way we actually get anything done. If you look back in previous terms, and I'm certainly not criticising, but Mayor Leanne had the luxury a lot of the time of coming into a room and knowing as the mayor that she could have a majority on basically any decision she needed. And I say that because while we will compromise on things, actually it takes a lot of work and a lot of leadership from you, Phil, to get to a point where you can get 9 people around a table to vote for something. We may not always agree on it, but that's the way that democracy works, and that's the cards that the people of Christchurch have given us to play with. I think it's worth reflecting a wee bit on how we've got to this point, and I think if we've talked about process, and look, there will always be changes we can do. But actually, if we go back to fundamentally the unanimously agreed letter of expectation that was established by the council, that has been the guiding document for this process. And within that, and I'm going to quote from it, it says, the capital program be proposed at a level that responds to actual need and that is demonstrably deliverable and affordable in each year of the LTP. To alleviate an unacceptably high capital program bow wave, which inevitably leads to large carry forwards each year, which then has the potential to drive unnecessary rate increases.
And I think that's something that's been lost when we're talking about deferrals or cuts. The council unanimously sent a direction, unanimously, to the council staff to come up with a deliverable capital program. And I actually think if you look around the country, this is probably New Zealand leading in terms of what we've done. The carry forwards will be significantly less, and that has a flow onto the ratepayers. But I think more than anything, because it's obviously a capital nature, what it does, it helps reduce what I call the speed wobbles on this organisation. We as a group, a collective governing body, put a significant amount of pressure on the staff within this organisation to be basically a jack of all trades and a master of nothing. What this does is actually let them have a bit more focus on some specific things that will lift resident satisfaction. So, look, I think what Vic said in terms of not now makes sense, because this is what this delivers. It's something that is achievable, that doesn't put too much pressure on the organisation, so we can do it well and do it once. I think we're going to see a massive uplift in resident satisfaction as we work through this for the next couple of years. Because while we can, and we'll get to the rates rise, and that is obviously concerning, I think the biggest lever we've got is the capital program, which can really drive outcomes across the city. So these are not deferrals and cuts. This is a unanimously agreed upon approach which says let's do something deliverable for the city, and I think that's really useful. Look, I guess just finally, reflecting at a high level, this is a very, very complicated process, and if you're looking across the country, if you were central government right now, you'd be going, actually, is this the best process for how we deliver these kind of plans for the city? We've effectively finished it now. Audit New Zealand and all of our team have worked so hard for so long. And on Monday, the audit team are back in auditing our final accounts for the year. Then we will start on the annual report. There's a lot of costs, there's a lot of regulation that's associated with stuff. And I look at it and go, if we strike an LTP now, why do we need to go to the nth degree every year in the outer years? If this is one of the biggest things that a council will do we need to put all that resource and again to sorting an annual plan next year, or actually can we let the staff get on and deliver what the people of Christchurch are paying for? So I think there's some big challenges right across the board for that as well. I just want to reflect on one other thing, and then I will shut up, Phil, but it's just around, I've been guilty of it in the past, and I continue to do it, is the criticising of council in terms of its inefficiency. And I think absolutely there are processes and procedures that could be refined to speed up delivery and to get better value for income. Better value for money, which I guess impacts our income. But there's a really interesting stat, which is that if you take our staffing level from 2019 till now, our net staff has gone up 35 people. So our net staff has gone up 35 people, FTEs, and we've brought on 5 new facilities over that time. So what that means is actually since 2019, we have put more into the front line of our organisation than into the back office by the tune of 300 people across this organisation. And so this is the stuff that's not talked about enough as a council, where we get bombarded or we get lambasted, however you do it, in terms of the criticism we get. But I just want to acknowledge all the people in this room and everyone within the organisation who are working constantly to get better efficiency and more drive within the place, and it's not talked about as much as it should be. So, look, this certainly doesn't go far enough, but again, I go back to that point that the Mayor does not command the ability to dictate around this table an outcome. We work on compromise. That is the nature of democracy, and we've got to a point today where I think we have to pass this plan, because ultimately central government will be looking and going, if you guys can't make decisions as elected members by majority, not everyone has to agree with it, completely get that, but if a majority of us cannot compromise, then actually what are we here for? So I would hope that we can at least get 9 people around the table to land this today, and then we will certainly need to start working on that annual plan, because I hate to say it, but the number for next year is still too high. So.
Great. Thank you very much. Right, 'tis I. We have now reached the critical moment. Right now, after amendments, we are sitting at an overall rates increase of 9.9. 9.9 for year 25, 8.48 for year 26, and 5.80 for year 27. We started on Tuesday morning at 9.95%. We had a balanced budget. Auditors love these things, don't they? Ratings for renewals, no cuts in levels of service, funding for key community groups and organisations, and including Te Kaha. We have worked through amendments and agreed to some, made some tweaks to repayment proposals, and ended up at the 9.9. This is one of the lowest increases around the country, especially amongst other city councils. We started at Tuesday under 10% and have ended up under 10%. For me, this is really important, as every lower point is less that's coming from strapped back pockets around our city. When compared with other city councils around New Zealand, we have navigated these choppy financial waters in a relatively strong position. This has our final rate increase among some of the lowest in the country across all council types, without cutting any services that you've come to expect from the Christchurch City Council. We also have a program of capital works that take our city forward while still being deliverable. And more, this figure includes 2.1 one-off cost for Te Kaha, which a large number of people voted to have made larger. Submitted, not voted. This result was made possible in part by dividends from our holdings company, Christchurch City Holdings Limited, investing subvention credits towards debt repayment, and by tapping into other things like our Capital Endowment Fund and Strengthening Communities Fund. This is exactly what they're for, and it's a perfect example of prudent financial management paying dividends for the rainy day. But any increase has a significant impact on people's back pocket, and we know this increase of 9.9 will put pressure on some businesses and households. We must continue to find ways to reduce our operating and building costs as we implement this LTP to further reduce the impact on rates increases beyond the first year. And here's the result: a plan for the next decade of our cities that's ambitious, affordable and achievable. The 3 A's, if you'd like to say it. I'm always saying that Christchurch is the best place to live, raise a family and do business in. I believe this LTP is a solid roadmap for the next 10 years, continuing to deliver the services our community wants, supporting efforts to improve our environment and reduce emissions, all while taking advantage of opportunities to support our city's economy in the future. This is something we should all be proud of. Thank you to everyone that played a part, especially to all staff for 18 months of hard work. It's all very well for us to sit up here and we whistle up a piece of paper report, but this work on staff is immense, and I'm not joking when it's 18 months worth of work, and I take my hat off to everyone. So thank you very much for that. And with that, I will put the motion. All of those in favour? Aye. Against? We have a couple of things. So that is carried. Oh, okay. Okay, fair enough. Do that if you want to.
Resolution 17. Councillor Kewen? No. Councillor McLennan?
Yes.
Councillor McDonald?
Yes.
Councillor Henstock?
Yes.
Councillor Moore?
No.
Councillor Scundrett?
Yes.
Councillor Harrison Hunt?
Yes.
Councillor Coker? Yes. Councillor Peters?
Yes.
The Mayor?
Yes.
Councillor Templeton?
Aye.
Councillor Barber?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Cotter? Aye. Councillor Fields?
Yes.
Councillor Johansson?
Yes.
Councillor Donovan? Yes. Councillor Goff?
No.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, yes. 1, 2, 3, no.
Right, that is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, I will now move to adopt recommendations